Most people think they know what reality is, what life is, who they are, what the world expects from them. But what if everything you've been taught is a lie designed to keep you asleep? Carl Jung didn't just study the unconscious. He dared to explore the forbidden terrain of Gnosticism, where ancient truths clash with modern illusions. In Aion, Jung pulls back the curtain, showing that Christ, the Antichrist, and even the material world itself are not what we think. They're archetypes etched into your very soul. Here's the truth few dare to admit. Salvation isn't something handed to you by churches, governments, or gurus. It's a battle inside your own psyche. While the world screams for your loyalty, to money, to image, to blind rationality, there's a deeper call, the quest for individuation, for real liberation. If you've ever felt that gnawing emptiness after chasing success, if you've ever dreamed that your life is supposed to mean something more, you're already feeling the pull of the logos. In this video, we're not just scratching the surface. We're diving deep into the symbols, the myths, and the secret wisdom that can crack your false reality wide open. Ready to discover the hidden map to your own spiritual awakening, the one that religions, institutions, and even your ego don't want you to find? Let's step into the hidden teachings of Jung and Gnosticism, and finally see what's been buried inside you all along. Chapter 1. Gnosticism and Jungian Psychology. When people first hear about Gnosticism, they often picture dusty old texts filled with strange symbols and secret societies. But if Jung were sitting across from you right now, sipping his coffee with that glint of wisdom in his eye, he'd chuckle and say, "It's not about escape, it's about waking up." Through the lens of Jungian psychology, Gnosticism becomes a dynamic, living guide, a blueprint for understanding the unconscious and integrating it with the conscious mind. It's not some cosmic escape room. It's about transforming your own perception of reality through self-awareness. Rather than worshiping Christ as a distant, unreachable being, Gnosticism invites you to recognize Christ as a living symbol of your own latent potential. Jung believed that religious myths weren't just old stories. They were psychological maps of individuation, rich with archetypes waiting to be uncovered. When you look at the Gnostic tradition this way, you're not abandoning your faith, you're deepening it, turning external symbols inward to fuel your own spiritual awakening. It's like reading a sacred text, but realizing it's your own soul that's the true manuscript. Think about it. Most people today are trapped between materialism and a vague, uneasy longing for something more. They chase success, status, and approval without realizing they're running in circles designed by their unconscious fears. Gnosticism, especially when paired with Jungian psychology, acts like a cosmic GPS recalibration. It shows you that salvation isn't out there in some external event. It's hidden within, in the sacred marriage of self and unconscious. Ever wondered why you're drawn to certain dreams, books, or even random conversations? That's your unconscious waving at you. Jung loved using examples from everyday life to illustrate these deep truths. Say you constantly dream of wandering lost in a labyrinth. Instead of freaking out or Googling, "Am I cursed?" Gnostic wisdom would prompt you to ask, what part of me is lost? What deeper truth am I ignoring? This is dream interpretation at its finest, turning symbols into psychological gold. It's no wonder Jung saw ancient Gnostic myths as early blueprints for a fully realized psychological life, long before Freud thought to lay anyone down on a couch. In short, when you blend Gnosticism with Jungian psychology, you're not dealing with dusty dogma. You're engaging in philosophical metaphysics with the power to reshape your life. You're learning to read your unconscious like a sacred text, to see the demiurge of your ego for what it is, and to begin walking a path towards spiritual liberation. And speaking of liberation, few archetypes shine a brighter light on this journey than the figure of Christ himself. Chapter 2. Christ as the archetype of the self. Most people have been taught to see Christ as a remote, unattainable figure, someone to worship but never truly embody. But Jung, drawing from Gnosticism and Jungian psychology, flips that notion on its head. He saw Christ not as an unreachable God, but as a symbol of the self, the totality of who you are meant to become. Instead of chasing after external salvation, the call is to become the Christ within you, walking the path of individuation and awakening to your divine potential. Now, that might sound lofty, but it's surprisingly practical once you break it down. When you treat Christ as an archetype, you're looking at a living model of wholeness, someone who unites opposites, who carries both suffering and redemption within. In everyday life, this might look like forgiving someone who betrayed you, not because it's easy, but because the process of forgiveness births a deeper part of yourself. That act of balancing darkness and light is pure individuation, and Jung would argue, pure spiritual alchemy. Take a moment and reflect. When was the last time you reacted impulsively, letting your ego, that loud inner demiurge, dictate your actions? Gnosticism and Jung's insights offer a radical counterpoint. Instead of blaming the world, you recognize the Christ archetype whispering inside you, calling for integration, not division. It's a small, powerful choice, speaking a word of peace when anger wants the microphone, embodying logos over chaos. That's the Christ energy already alive within you, waiting to be actualized. Examples? Start by looking at simple but profound practices. Journaling daily about your inner conflicts is a humble yet potent way to walk this path. Books like The Red Book by Jung or The Gospel of Thomas can also open hidden chambers of the heart. Meditation focused on symbols, like visualizing a balance of gold and shadow within your chest, can trigger this inner union. You're not praying for some external miracle. You're forging salvation through the fire of self-awareness. By framing Christ as the archetype of the self, Jung and the Gnostics tear down the wall between the sacred and the psychological. They show that salvation isn't about escape. It's about profound integration. Yet, where there is light striving to be born, there's always a shadow lurking nearby, a shadow we must understand if we are to complete the alchemical work. And so, the figure of the Antichrist steps onto the stage. Chapter 3. The Role of the Antichrist. In the dance of light and shadow, it's never enough to focus solely on Christ without acknowledging the Antichrist lurking in the psyche. Jung, deeply inspired by Gnosticism and Jungian psychology, understood this better than most. The Antichrist isn't some comic book villain crashing through the clouds. It's a psychological force, a manifestation of the ego gone rogue. It's what happens when the logos is silenced and materialism, selfishness, and unchecked rationality take the throne of your inner kingdom. Think about it. Every time we sacrifice our intuition on the altar of cold, mechanical thinking, we invite the Antichrist energy into our lives. He's subtle, that one, not always the stuff of horror movies, but the voice whispering that status, money, and power are the only markers of success. Jung saw this as the great psychic danger of the modern world, a culture drunk on rationalism, forgetting the alchemy of the soul. It's like building a mansion with no foundation. You might impress your neighbors, but one storm and it all crumbles. You can spot this force in society everywhere. Ever met someone who defines themselves only by their job title, their bank account, or the brands they wear? That's the Antichrist archetype in a three-piece suit. And the scary part? It's seductive because it feeds the ego exactly what it craves: superiority, separation, control. Jung wasn't wagging his finger in judgment. He was waving a giant red flag, warning that this psychological possession leads not to salvation, but to profound spiritual entropy. Practically speaking, how do you resist this force? Start by cultivating practices that restore balance between your ego and your unconscious. Read works like Memories, Dreams, Reflections by Jung, or explore dream interpretation as a tool for staying grounded. Meditation, acts of service, even spending time in nature can pull you back from the cliff. It's not about rejecting success or reason, but about weaving them back into a tapestry that honors both logos and soul. Understanding the Antichrist within isn't about demonizing yourself. It's about recognizing the traps laid by unchecked ego. Once you see it, you can choose to embody something higher, something rooted in the full depth of your being. And to fully grasp why the material world feels so alluring and so imprisoning, we have to confront the ancient figure who shaped this illusion, the Demiurge. Chapter 4. The Demiurge and the Material World. If there's one villain bigger than the Antichrist in the Gnostic and Jungian worldviews, it's the Demiurge. But don't picture a cartoonish monster with a pitchfork. This force is far more insidious. The Demiurge represents the mindless creator of the material world, a figure who traps souls in illusions of separateness and superficiality. In Jungian psychology, he's the archetype of rigid materialism, the part of the psyche that says, what you see is all there is. It's a crafty trick that binds countless people without them even realizing it. The Demiurge is alive every time we let rationalism choke out imagination, every time we swap inner wisdom for external validation. You see it when someone reduces themselves to a mere cog in the corporate machine, chasing promotions and possessions as if salvation can be bought at a discount. Gnosticism warns that this fixation on material form is a trap, not unlike living inside a dream without knowing you're dreaming. Jung would nod and remind us, real freedom requires waking up from that trance. So how do you recognize the Demiurge's fingerprints in your own life? Start by noticing when you're obsessed with control, security, and status at the expense of your inner voice. If your dreams are screaming, if your gut keeps twisting in discomfort while your mind rationalizes everything away, that's the Demiurge at work. Reading the Gnostic Jung and the 7 Sermons to the Dead can open your eyes to these subtle manipulations and offer a path back to your true self. And here's the kicker. Resisting the Demiurge doesn't mean rejecting the material world altogether. It means learning to engage with it consciously, like a wise magician handling volatile ingredients. Jung saw alchemy as a perfect metaphor for this, working with the base material of life to transform it, rather than being enslaved by it. It's a dance between the visible and invisible, one that requires fierce honesty and a deep trust in your own spiritual awakening. Escaping the Demiurge's trap isn't just an intellectual game. It's an alchemical process of reclaiming your inner kingdom. And speaking of alchemy, few things capture this journey of transformation better than the ancient art of turning lead into gold, both in the lab and within the soul itself. Chapter 5. Alchemy as Spiritual Transformation. When most people hear the word alchemy, they picture old bearded men hunched over bubbling cauldrons, trying to turn lead into gold. But Jung, inspired by Gnosticism and philosophical metaphysics, saw alchemy as a profound symbol of spiritual transformation. Alchemy wasn't really about getting rich quick. It was about the soul's slow, fiery evolution. Every experiment, every strange formula, mirrored the individuation process, turning the heavy, unconscious parts of the self into the radiant gold of full self-awareness. Imagine your unconscious mind as a chaotic mass of raw, untapped energy, what the alchemists would call prima materia. Without conscious work, this material stays heavy, dark, and inert. But through the symbolic operations of alchemy, reflection, dream interpretation, conscious choices, you start purifying this inner chaos. Think of it like working through your deepest fears or insecurities until they become sources of wisdom instead of chains. The Red Book by Jung dives deep into this process, almost like a manual for modern alchemists. And you don't need a medieval lab to start your own spiritual transformation. You can begin with practices like dream journaling, shadow work, or exploring archetypes through myths and religious myths. For instance, when a dream presents you with a snake, instead of recoiling, you could ask, "What hidden wisdom is this serpent offering me?" By interpreting symbols consciously, you refine your unconscious contents, just like turning base metals into psychological gold. It's gritty work, but that's where real salvation lies. Alchemy also teaches patience, a rare commodity today. Just as you can't rush the philosopher's stone into existence, you can't rush individuation. It's a slow distillation of insights, failures, breakthroughs, and sometimes hilarious mistakes. Jung loved reminding people that individuation isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. The Gnostics knew this too. Salvation wasn't an elevator ride to heaven. It was a slow, spiraling climb toward liberation through self-understanding. This alchemical journey is messy, fascinating, and full of surprises. Yet, the deeper you go, the more you realize that dreams, symbols, and unconscious whispers aren't random. They're your personal roadmap. And when you learn to decode these mysterious messages, you step into the next stage of inner exploration, the sacred art of dream interpretation. Chapter 6: Dream Interpretation and Symbols. Dreams have often been dismissed as random static, but Jung and the Gnostics before him knew better. Dreams are like secret letters from your unconscious, filled with archetypes, spiritual warnings, and hidden gifts. In Jungian psychology, dream interpretation isn't just an intellectual hobby. It's a vital practice for individuation and spiritual awakening. Each symbol, no matter how bizarre, carries a piece of the puzzle you need to navigate the labyrinth of the self, peeling back the illusions spun by the Demiurge. Think of it like this. When you dream of being lost in a vast city, it's not just your mind being weird. It's a vivid symbol reflecting your current struggle to integrate parts of your unconscious into the waking world. Gnostic tradition would nudge you to ask, where have I lost touch with my spiritual essence? Jung would push even further. What logos can I extract from this experience to guide my next step? Dream symbols aren't riddles to be solved. They're doorways to salvation, disguised in the language of the soul. If you want to start working with your dreams seriously, keep a dream journal by your bed and write down every scrap you remember the moment you wake up. Over time, patterns emerge, certain symbols, themes, even recurring figures that are archetypal messengers. Reading books like Man and His Symbols by Jung can sharpen your interpretative skills. And if a dream leaves you deeply unsettled, that's usually a sign it's carrying something potent, something the unconscious wants you to finally face. Dreams aren't just about personal issues, either. Sometimes they carry collective messages, symbols that echo the spiritual dilemmas of an entire generation. In that sense, dream interpretation becomes a sacred responsibility. You're not just decoding your personal unconscious. You're tapping into the collective unconscious, that deep ocean of human experience and myth where salvation stories, philosophical metaphysics, and religious myths all swirl together, waiting for someone brave enough to dive in. Mastering the art of dream interpretation turns your nights into a sacred workshop of transformation. But there's another guide who appears over and over again in these mysterious realms, a figure who embodies communication, transformation, and divine mischief. Mercury, also known to the ancient world as Hermes. Chapter 7. Mercury, Logos, and the Power of Symbols. If there's a trickster guide for the soul's transformation, it's Mercury, or Hermes, as the ancients called him. In Gnosticism, alchemy, and Jungian psychology alike, Mercury symbolizes the bridge between the unconscious and conscious minds. He's that slippery messenger who carries wisdom across realms, helping you interpret the wild, symbolic language of dreams and visions. Jung loved Mercury because he embodied the logos, the living word, that transforms chaos into meaning, darkness into light, confusion into individuation. Think about how often life throws you symbols you don't immediately understand. A song that moves you to tears, a random encounter that shifts your life, a dream image that haunts you for days. That's Mercury at work, nudging you toward greater self-awareness. He doesn't shout or force. He whispers, weaves, hints. Recognizing his presence means paying attention to the subtle connections, the synchronicities that hint at a deeper spiritual awakening already unfolding beneath your busy mind. A practical way to work with Mercury's energy is to practice symbolic journaling. Whenever a dream, event, or even a passing thought strikes you as strangely meaningful, write it down. Then, play detective. What archetypes are showing up? Is it the wounded healer, the wise old man, the divine child? Using tools like Symbols of Transformation by Jung can sharpen your ability to decode these clues. Over time, you'll notice that nothing in your life is truly random. Everything is ripe with logos, waiting to be unveiled. Mercury also reminds us that transformation is rarely linear. He dances between opposites, slips between definitions, and challenges rigid thinking, the very thing the Demiurge and the Antichrist energy try to impose. This fluidity is not chaos for chaos's sake. It's creative chaos, the birthplace of philosophical metaphysics and genuine salvation. Embracing Mercury means embracing the unexpected, trusting that the self is working behind the scenes, even when your ego is confused or scared. Symbols, dreams, and synchronicities are Mercury's fingerprints on your life. And once you start following those clues, they lead you down the winding road of individuation and spiritual freedom. But what exactly is that ultimate goal? According to the Gnostics and Jung, it's not fame, wealth, or control. It's the deep liberation of the soul itself. Chapter 8. The Gnostic Quest for Liberation. At the heart of Gnosticism, and mirrored in Jungian psychology, is a burning, relentless quest, liberation. But not liberation in the way most people imagine it. It's not about escaping taxes, quitting your job, or finally getting to retire on a beach. No, the Gnostic idea of salvation is the soul breaking free from the illusion of the material world, from the heavy chains spun by the Demiurge and enforced by blind materialism. It's about seeing reality for what it truly is and choosing to wake up. Jung pointed out that true individuation isn't just psychological fine-tuning. It's a spiritual revolution inside you. Gnosticism agrees. The moment you realize you're trapped in a dream of surfaces, a hunger for deeper meaning is born. Suddenly, chasing the latest gadgets or the perfect Instagram feed feels hollow. You start yearning for a connection to something real, something eternal. That's the first whisper of spiritual awakening. It's a call that few have the courage to answer. Real liberation begins with radical self-awareness. It's looking at the unconscious patterns that govern your choices, the hidden fears that keep you enslaved, and saying no more. Practical steps? Dive into shadow work, guided meditation on archetypes, or reading the Gospel of Mary Magdalene to reconnect with ancient voices of liberation. When you catch yourself acting from ego, not self, pause, breathe, and realign. It's these small, conscious acts that chip away at the prison walls built by the Demiurge. But make no mistake, this journey is messy, emotional, and sometimes downright terrifying. The logos within will guide you, but not always with clear, easy maps. Sometimes liberation feels like losing everything you thought mattered, only to discover that you've gained your soul. Jung often warned that individuation can look, at first, like disintegration. Yet in that disintegration, new life forms, the true life that religious myths have been whispering about for millennia. As you move deeper into this quest for liberation, you begin to feel the profound tension within yourself. The push and pull between your conscious identity and your vast, mysterious unconscious. Understanding this inner duality isn't just another intellectual exercise. It's the key to continuing the work of transformation. Chapter 9. The Dual Nature of the Self. Inside every person, a secret drama is unfolding. The clash between the conscious self and the vast, shadowy unconscious. Jung, pulling deeply from Gnosticism and his own discoveries in Jungian psychology, taught that this tension isn't a flaw. It's the very engine of spiritual growth. The conscious ego might think it's running the show, but the unconscious, the self in its fullness, whispers through symbols, dreams, and synchronicities, constantly inviting us to awaken to a bigger story. It's like trying to steer a ship while a vast, hidden current pulls at your rudder. Most people resist this current, believing they have to double down on control and rationality. But the Gnostics and Jung agree. Salvation comes from learning to dance with the unconscious, not fighting it. It's messy, sure. You'll question your reality, your identity, your most cherished beliefs. But that's exactly how the Logos works, by shattering the illusions that keep you chained to a half-lived life. A simple, powerful practice. Spend 10 minutes a day reflecting on your emotional reactions instead of your external circumstances. When anger flares or sadness seeps in, don't ask, "Who's to blame?" Instead, ask, "What part of me is crying out to be integrated?" This shift is profound. Books like Owning Your Own Shadow by Robert A. Johnson, deeply rooted in Jungian thought, offer practical guides for this transformative work. You're not fixing yourself. You're learning to hold opposites with compassion. The Logos acts as a lantern in this internal darkness, helping you make sense of the chaos, the contradictions, the wild emotional swings. It brings order without flattening complexity. This process isn't about becoming a saint or a sage overnight. It's about becoming whole. Religious myths, from the tale of Christ to the struggles of Mercury, all point to this heroic journey inward. A journey where duality isn't erased, but embraced and transcended. And so, as this secret war between self and unconscious continues, a deeper longing starts to grow, a longing not just to understand, but to unite, to transform, to return to a hidden source beyond both thought and matter. Aion, Carl Jung's profound meditation on Gnosticism, leads us exactly into that next frontier. Conclusion. What will you do about it? Now that you've glimpsed the hidden architecture of your own soul, the real question is, what will you do about it? Are you willing to dive deeper, to confront the Demiurge within, to challenge the Antichrist tendencies of your ego, and to follow the thread of logos into full awakening? Or will you turn away, clinging to the illusions that the material world so desperately wants you to worship? The choice between unconsciousness and liberation is unfolding inside you right now. Imagine if you started treating every dream, every symbol, every emotional trigger not as random noise, but as Mercury whispering messages from your unconscious. How different would your life be a year from today if you decided to walk the Gnostic path of individuation, using everything you've learned about Jungian psychology, alchemy, and the self? Your transformation isn't waiting in some distant heaven. It's waiting in your willingness to see, to integrate, and to act. So tell me, are you ready to stop living someone else's version of reality and claim the fullness of your being? Drop a comment below sharing the symbol, dream, or idea that resonated most deeply with you. I want to hear it. And if you're serious about continuing this path of deep spiritual awakening, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We're just getting started, and the self you were always meant to be is closer than you think.